In this video, we'll discuss some of the music ideas of Sitting, Waiting, Wishing by Jack Johnson. This song has quite a few music ideas, and you can think of this more as an introduction. If you go to myguitarlessons.com, we step through playing the song as well as each of these music ideas in detail. The first music idea that we'll discuss is a backbeat. And what a backbeat means is that in a song that is in 4/4 time, which means that there are 4 beats per measure and each beat lasts for a quarter of note, that beats 2 and 4 are accented. So if you want to get a backbeat going on the guitar, you can kind of act like a drummer. One of the good things about the guitar, one of the many good things about the guitar, is that you can act like multiple instruments. And one of the things is drum. So what you can do is just lightly touch the string so they don't ring. And that's a percussive sound. What you can do is count the eighth note. You can play eighth notes and count 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. To add the backbeat, what you do is you accent beats 2 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The next music idea that we're going to discuss is 16th notes. Even though the basic motion of the song is eighth notes, so you're playing downstrokes of eighth notes, which are counted 1, 2, 3, 4. Once in a while, in each measure, Jack Johnson is playing 16th notes. And that sounds like this. And the way you play those is once you're comfortable with the eighth notes, then just play the upstroke. So your hand isn't moving any faster to play them. You're just playing the upstroke. And the rhythm in this song is 16th notes to start the song. So on the end of beat 4, there's actually two 16th notes and then the 1. So very slowly it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the basic feel. And that's the basic feel for the whole measure. So just playing percussively without worrying about the chord, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to talk about the verse of the song. So the song has 3 main parts: the verse, the chorus, and the bridge. And each of them have very similar music ideas, but also unique music ideas. So we'll look at them kind of separately. So for the verse, what we need to know is the mother scale, the major scale for the verse is the C major scale. And what this means is all of the notes of the melody, as well as most of the notes of the chords, are from the C major scale. And if you're using the open position chords, there's a family of chords related to C major. And the 1 chord is the C major chord. The 2 chord is the D minor chord. The 3 chord is the E minor chord. The 4 chord is the F chord. The 5 chord is a G chord. The 6 chord is an A minor chord. And the 7 chord is a B diminished chord. Okay, so those are the open position C major chords. But for the verse, what Jack Johnson is doing is playing bar chords. And these are based on open position chords but moved up the neck. The C chord we can play using an E major shape. That's an E major chord. If we move it up 1 fret, that becomes an F chord. You move it up 2 more frets, that becomes a G chord. Move it up 3 frets, or 2 more frets to the 5th, you have a chord. Move it to the 7th fret, you have a B chord. And finally on the 8th fret, you have a C chord. So that's a different way of playing a C major chord. Same sound, but different notes. So the chord sounds the same, but the voicing is different. There's higher pitched notes, and the arrangements of the notes, the arrangement of the notes are different. So that's the C major. That's going to be the 1 chord using the bar chords. The 2 chord is a D minor chord using open position, but using the E minor shaped chord, what you can do is take the E minor, move it up 1 fret, that becomes F minor, 2 frets G minor, 2 more frets A minor, which is going to be the home chord of the song. 2 more frets is a B minor, and then the C minor at the 8th fret, and then finally the D minor chord. Oops. It's kind of hard to play up there. So this is an E minor shaped D minor chord. So that's the 2 chord. So the 1 chord, C major, 2 chord, D minor. 3 chord is an E minor, which you could keep moving up the neck, or you can wrap all the way back down and just play an open E minor chord. So that's the 3 chord. The 4 chord is an F chord, which is an E major shape, moved up just 1 fret. The 5 chord is a G chord at the 3rd fret. The 6 chord is an A minor chord. So this is an E minor shaped A minor chord, so at the 5th fret. The 7 chord is a B diminished chord, which is, you can think of this as an E minor shaped chord, but you got to take the 5th and drop it 1 fret, so it becomes diminished. So that's a not so common chord to be played, at least like this. So that's the 7 chord, B diminished, and then we're back to the 1 chord, which is C major. So that's the family of chords using bar chords. And the reason why you want to use bar chords in this song is because it helps you get that nice backbeat feel, that nice percussive feel. So that's an A minor, being able to basically damp the strings at will. And if you play that as an open chord, you could do it, but it would be much harder. The strings are going to ring. So that's one of the reasons that you would, even though A minor is easier to play here, why you want to use a bar chord, so you can get that nice percussive sound. So that's the family of chords in the key of C major. And if we keep our C major perspective, the song starts on an A minor chord, which is the 6th chord. And then it's playing the major chords from the key of C major. So it starts on the 6th chord, drops to the 5 chord, which is a G, then drops to the 4 chord, which is an F, and then moves up to the 1 chord, which is a C major. So even though it starts with the minor chord, it's using the major chords from the key mainly. So if you visualize the family of chords, you can easily see 6, 5, 4, 1. The next music idea that we'll talk about in the verse is that you can think of this from a minor perspective. The first chord is an A minor, and actually the last chord of the song as well is an A minor. So if you consider A minor home, it's the same note, the same chords as from the C major scale, but this is the 1 chord. So if you look at the chords of the song, it starts with the 1 chord, which is an A minor, then goes to the flat 7 chord, which is a G chord, then to the flat 6 chord, which is an F chord, and then up to the flat 3 chord, which is a C chord. So you can think of it both ways. It's the same chords. So from a major perspective, it's the 6 chord to the 5 chord to the 4 chord to the 1 chord. And from a minor perspective, it's the 1 chord to the flat 7 chord to the flat 6 chord to the flat 3 chord. Now the melody is a pentatonic melody in the verse, so that means that there's 5 notes used in the melody. And this can be thought of as either C major pentatonic or A minor pentatonic, depending on how you want to look at it. The first note of the melody is an A note, and then if you consider that the 1 note, then the next note is a C note, which is the flat 3rd. So you can think of this as a minor melody. So it's just another way to look at the song, different perspectives, because as we get to the chorus and the bridge, we're going to have to change the perspective a little bit. So thinking of this both as possibly C major or A minor is helpful. The next music idea that we'll talk about from the verse is some of the non-diatonic notes that are used in the chord progression. A diatonic note is a note from the scale. So if we're considering the C major scale, then a non-diatonic note is a note that is not in the C major scale. And Jack Johnson plays some of these notes to add kind of more color to the song, more interest, but also get our ears used to hearing other notes that might be used later in the song. The start of the song is an A minor chord. So if we're thinking in terms of the key of C major, A minor is the 6th chord, so that is diatonic. That's from the scale. And then what he's doing is in each measure he plays the chord and then he lifts his pinky. And once you lift the pinky, you then have an A minor 7 chord. So that note here is a G note, which is part of the C major scale. So that change is diatonic. The notes are from the scale. Then he slides down to the G major chord and then again lifts his pinky, and then that's adding this note, which is an F note, and that is also from the C major scale. So that is a diatonic change. So when he lifts that pinky, it changes the G major to a G dominant chord. And G is the 5 chord of the key of C major, and a 4-note version of that chord is a dominant chord. So that's why that's also from the scale. So the first 2 measures are all notes from the scale. Then he goes to the F major, which is a diatonic chord. That's the 4 chord in the key of C major. But then he again lifts his pinky to make an F dominant chord. And now if you see that this note, a D sharp or E flat, is in the progression. So that's the first non-diatonic note of the song. And that just adds some interest. It sounds fine, but it's not in the scale. He then changes to a C major chord, which is part of the key of C major. It's the 1 chord. But then he again lifts that pinky, and he now has a C dominant chord, or C7 chord. So that again introduces another note, this B flat note. So here's a B note, it's a B flat. So this is another note that is not in the scale. But again, that sounds fine in context. So if you look at the progression, it's diatonic, non-diatonic, diatonic, non-diatonic. And you can think of that kind of as a blues. It's common to change chords that would be major to dominant in blues. It's called dominant blues. And what that does is introduce new sounds as well as the ability to add new notes to the melody. So Jack Johnson is really mixing and matching a lot of music ideas in this song. Now we'll talk about some of the music ideas in the chorus. The first idea that we'll talk about is a harmonic minor scale. So the chorus sounds different than the beginning of the song, and it's not just using different chords or different notes from the same scale. It's actually a different sound, and instead of using the notes from C major, he's using one note that is different, and that one note makes a big difference. So the chords of the chorus are E major. And remember, E major is not in the key of C major. And then the next chord is an A minor, which was our home key before. So what we can do is think of this as an A harmonic minor section. And what that means is that instead of having an E minor chord, which contains a G note, you have an E major chord, which is a G sharp note. So in the key of A, that is a major 7. So we're taking the minor scale and changing it so that the 7th is major instead of minor. So that changes the E minor chord to an E major chord. And that is the first chord of the chorus. If you think of this from a minor perspective, the A minor is the 1 chord, and now we have a major 5 chord, which is the E major. So the chorus is basically, looking from that perspective, a major 5 going to the 1 chord. The next music idea that we'll talk about is some of the chords used in the chorus. As I mentioned, the chorus starts with an E chord, and if we're talking about an A harmonic minor scale, that is the 5 chord. Then he plays an E7 chord simply by lifting his ring finger. That is the dominant 5 chord of the key of A harmonic minor. Then he plays an A minor chord, which is the 1 chord of A harmonic minor. And then he plays an A minor 7, which is a little bit interesting because now that A minor 7 adds a G note, and that's the note that we changed earlier in the E chord. We changed it to a G sharp. So he's basically putting that G note back into the chords. And so that's not technically from the A harmonic minor scale, but it's a note that we've heard before in the song, and it sounds fine. So the nice thing about this, one of the nice things about the chorus, is that if you're playing the chords, it's the same shape. So you start with an E major, you lift your ring finger to get the E7, then you play the A minor, which is the same shape as the E major, just moved to the higher strings. And then again, you just lift your ring finger and play the A minor 7. So actually, as we step you through playing the song on myguitarlessons.com, we start with the chorus because it is easier to play than the verse. So those are the chords used in the chorus. The next music idea that we'll talk about related to the chorus is the rhythm. The rhythm is very similar to the rhythm in the verse, but the difference is that in the backbeat, instead of playing a percussive sound on the 2 and the 4, you're playing a full chord kind of louder on the 2 and the 4. So in the verse, it sounds like this. So you hear that two, that backbeat on the 2 and the 4. But in the chorus, it sounds like this. So you hear more of an accented chord on the 2 and the 4. So that is basically the difference. You're also, because you have the bar chords in the verse, you can mute the strings easily. These are more open chords, so they're going to ring out. And so that's one of the reasons that it sounds so different, even though your strumming hand is basically doing the same thing. The next music idea that we'll talk about from the chorus is that the melody actually uses the G sharp note in addition to the chords. So we know that the first chord of the chorus is an E major chord that adds a G sharp note on the 3rd string that is not in the key of C major or A natural minor. It's in the key of A harmonic minor. So the melody also uses that note. So he's starting on an E, but then the next thing he sings is that G sharp note. So in addition to the chords changing from C major, the melody is changing as well. Now we'll talk about some of the music ideas from the bridge of the song. So the bridge again sounds different than the rest of the song, and it's not just simply that he's using different notes or chords. He's actually changed perspective yet again. So basically, I think of this bridge as being a bridge that's in kind of a more classic C major key. And the melody, if you look at the melody of the bridge, it starts with a C note and goes right down the C major scale to the E note, basically, and then bounces around a little bit. So it's kind of like a C major, true C major section of the song. So now we can think about the C major open chords again. So in the key of C major, we have the 1 chord being the C chord, the 4 chord being an F chord, the 5 chord being the G chord. So one thing that is changed is in the bridge, the E, instead of being an E minor chord as it would be in the 3 of the key of C major, is changed to E major, just as it's done in the chorus of the song. So this can be considered a secondary dominant, which means a chord from the key that is changed from minor to major or dominant. So looking at this bridge classically from a C major scale, the chords start with the 1 chord, then go to the secondary dominant, so it's a major 3, F, which is the 4, and then G, which is the 5, goes down to F again. And then the second part of the bridge goes back to the C, again to that secondary dominant, F, G, and then he goes right back to the beginning of the song. So the bridge can be thought of as a 1, major 3, 4, and then 1 measure of 5 and 4, and then starting again 1, major 3, 4, 5, all in the key of C major. So those are some of the music ideas of the song. You can see that there's a lot going on, but one thing that is true is that most of the ideas are similar to each other. So even though there's a lot to understand, they're all related, and that's why the song sounds good. It's using a lot of different ideas from music history, basically, but they're all related in ways that our ears accept it and like the song. So if you go to myguitarlessons.com, we step through playing the song in detail as well as all of these ideas so that you build a nice strong foundation so you can actually understand what you're doing as you're playing the song, and as a result you'll play it better.